Hello, and welcome to Let's Talk Housing. I'm your host, Sarah Goldvine. In today's episode, we explore a unique housing development in Terrace that brings different generations together under one roof. This project offers not just homes, but a space where seniors and youth can connect, share stories, and build relationships. Designed in collaboration with youth and families, on the ground floor will be Foundry Terrace, offering integrated health and wellness services for young people ages 12 to 24. And then above the Foundry will be 43 homes affordable for seniors with low to moderate incomes. Joining us today to talk about this exciting project are Steve Matthias, Co-Executive Director of Foundry, and Michael McFetridge, Executive Director with Terrace and District Community Services Society. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge that we're recording today's episode on the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh on Coast Salish lands, as well as on the unceded territory of the Tsimshian and specifically the Kitsim-Kalem Nation. For transparency, we're recording this episode in November of 2024, and our conversation reflects the priorities of that time. Steve, Michael, welcome to Let's Talk Housing. Michael, let's start with you. Can you tell us a little bit more about this exciting project and what brought it to be?
Okay, well, we're a not-for-profit charity in a rural community. So when we make strategic decisions on how to make investments on behalf of our community, we have to make sure that we are maximizing the value proposition on whatever investment we're doing. And for us, because we're a social service provider, the value proposition is how many people can we help? And so if we're going to make a significant investment in our community, we want to make sure that we are ensuring that as many people get the benefit of our investment as possible. And we were at the place in our planning with Foundry Central in establishing a permanent home for Terrace Foundry site. And in that process, we came to realize that building our own location was probably the most prudent and most effective thing to do. And as soon as we came to that determination, maximizing the opportunity for this process, at least from our end, came into our machinations, right? So we then looked to our municipalities. They did a needs assessment in 2014, 2015. And that sounds like it's a long time ago, but at the time, it wasn't that long ago when we were doing it. We reached back and we looked to see what the Terrace municipality found. And obviously, seniors and youth are the two largest groups of people that were identified in their needs assessment. And so we tried to figure out a way to use our resource to bring benefit to both groups of people, with the primary focus on bringing a Foundry Central permanent home. That was the primary driver, but the secondary was who else can we help along the way. So that's kind of how it happened for us.
Yeah, that's great, Michael. So Steve, would love to bring you in here. So we, obviously Foundry operates centers right across the province, and this is a pretty unique model. What did the Foundry see in terms of the benefits here for community?
Thanks, Sarah. So Foundry is a provincial initiative. It's a program that is out of Providence Healthcare, which is a nonprofit society that supports various acute care settings like St. Paul's Hospital in downtown Vancouver. Longstanding history of working in the inner city. And we had initiated back in 2015 this idea of branded centers that had all the services that youth needed for their health and social service needs. And so at the time, in our second phase of expansion, the Northern Health Authority and the province had identified that Terrace was a really important hub for us to deliver services from, given its positioning in central west north BC. And so when we began conversations with Mike and the team at TDCSS, we understood that Foundry would be a really significant social asset in the community, and that because of what is probably a dearth of places for young people to go, it was really important that we create something special and something that really marked a new direction, I think, for services for young people in the city. And so when we started that conversation with Mike and the team in Terrace, it was really clear that going beyond an initial 23 or 2400 square foot space was really critical, because it would provide opportunities for increased programming and increased wellness and recreational programming specifically, and also give the young people a place where they could come after school hours to do more than just access, say, a health service, but actually access social service as well. So that was the opportunity that we saw. And it was wonderful that BC Housing came alongside with funding to really create, I think, what is a fairly unique initiative in the province.
Help our listeners understand what this space is going to be like. I mean, you've got right now, you have an interim site. What types of services are you offering to youth, Steve, out of that site, and how do you think that'll change once you have access to the permanent purpose-built location?
Well, what I can say is that Foundry centers are meant to provide most of the services that a young person would need. So, mental health and substance use, primary care, sexual health or reproductive health services, and then social services such as employment, so work and education, as well as paid positions for young people to work as peers. And so that is the full model. That is the full model. And that's what we are able to do in spaces that are typically 6 to 8,000 square feet. Terrace has a smaller space right now because it's roughly, I think, Mike, about 2,300 square feet, if I recall. But maybe, Mike, you can talk about what the services are currently being offered.
Well, we're a full fidelity site, Steve. I mean, that's one of the great things that I think that our teams together have managed to pull off is with a much smaller site. It's an interim site. It's about 3,000, 3,500 square feet altogether. Since we've opened, we've been a full fidelity site, meaning that we have all of the service streams and the integration required for the full Foundry model. And we have just seen the benefits right away. I mean, since we've opened our door, we opened in the middle of the pandemic. I mean, that's something that we need to acknowledge. And ever since we opened our door the first time, our center has been full and vibrant and accessed across all the service streams, right? And it's provided a very safe, unique place in our community for youth to go for any number of things. I mean, it's not just a destination because you have a problem, right? And I think that's a key thing to note here is that when a Foundry site is firing on full pistons, it's a very holistic environment. And having youth come in for any number of reasons, even social, even just a plain social connection with someone that they feel safe with, that they feel connected with, and that they can have that basic connection with someone in a safe environment. And on top of it, you've got everything else that a youth might need in order to make good decisions for themselves, to develop self-determination and autonomy. We've seen our program in Terrace produce that outcome for the many, many, many of the youth that have frequented our doorstep, right? And so that's been our experience so far. And what the new site is going to look like and provide for our programming is significantly more capacity, right? We are challenged with the type of space that we have and the amount of space that we have. And with this new space, it's been intentionally designed through collaboration from the youth and the professional set of workers that will come in and use the system. They've had a wonderful time of coming together and expressing their mutual needs. And so the design of the center itself is very innovative that way, in that there's everything there professionally set out in the correct fashion that professionals from the number of different service streams can expect. And so it's very useful for them. But at the same time, at a very primary level, youth have said, this is what we need. And this is how it would be great if it can be structured for us. And that's incorporated as well. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how that jams out. right? I think that's going to be a wonderful progression for Terrace in particular, is that we've going to gone from a very functional, useful environment to a much more capable space where enhanced programming and connections with our community can take place.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've got an amazing suite of services that are going to be able to be delivered in this new site, Michael. But you could have paired with any number of different organizations, and specifically, you're bringing in a partnership with housing and providing housing not to youth but to seniors. Can you tell us more about why you think it's important to pair the services and community within a building that offers housing and housing for seniors?
Well, Sarah, I'm going to preface my response with saying I'm going to be careful with this answer, but I think this is a natural extension, and I'm really hopeful that BC Housing, now that they've had some experience in working with other, I want to use the term public body, but let's just with another organization with a different kind of mandate. I'm hoping that there's been a wonderful connection of like-minded people at higher level. I know that Foundry has definitely seen the partnership potential with BC Housing, and I'm really hoping, as an outsider, as the recipient of the beneficence of public bodies, I really hope that BC Housing sees the synergy and the effectiveness of pairing and partnering with organizations like Foundry Central and not-for-profits in the community, and how it can provide opportunities like this that aren't necessarily boilerplate or cookie cutter templates that they may have previously been used to using in how they go about and provide services for British Columbians.
Steve, I love your thoughts on this too. I mean, out of all of the models, what benefits do you see and does Foundry see with partnering services for youth with housing for seniors? Why is that important?
I think it's important for a multitude of reasons. One, we know with Foundry, we're looking for permanent homes that are really intended to become social assets and social amenities, and sometimes that can be a challenge when you're dealing with landlords and you're dealing with potentially short lease options. It seems like every building in BC is scheduled for demolition at some point in the next 5 to 10 years. So it's not always easy to find a long term partner. And we also know that this is the Foundry model is something that the government, the province, is committed to for more than just this generation. So finding permanent homes, ones that really are designed with young people in mind, are critical and ideal. So when an opportunity like this comes along and we're looking at the possibility of being on the ground floor of a housing site, the housing site is going to be important as a place to draw folks to, as we've alluded to. But it'll also be important for young people to feel welcome there. And there are certain combinations of housing that we feel are really conducive to young people feeling welcome. And I think that having seniors housing, where young people are not likely to have conflict with people in the housing, and are likely to be able to interact in a way that is intergenerational and is respectful, I think is really important and potentially creates opportunities that right now we don't have in communities. We haven't necessarily seen in the last couple generations young people having time with seniors or elders in their community. And as we know, and what we're seeing now, obviously, as we decolonize healthcare, as we really see the reemergence of Indigenous culture as well as non-Western culture, is that relationship is really important. It's one that I think, as to colonial organizations, or settler organizations, I should say, we have a responsibility to try to foster the opportunity for young people to interact with seniors in their community and to see what that looks like. We certainly know that seniors tend to get up a lot earlier in the day than young people, so there may be opportunities for shared amenity space. But there may also be opportunities for mentorship, moments that we're hoping we can create in the years ahead. So I think that's what we saw as an opportunity. We've seen another project in Squamish where the bottom floor is Foundry Squamish or Foundry Sea to Sky, and the other levels is low income housing, and that seems to be working well. So family housing, and that seems to be working well also. So we're curious to see what this model looks like as it rolls out.
Yeah, I mean, there's some beautiful opportunities there for youth to feel really connected to a broader community and to be able to learn from and connect with elders directly on site as part of an integrated community. Michael, for our audience, can you talk just a little bit about the importance of that connection, the intergenerational connection, specifically for Terrace? I think maybe some of our listeners wouldn't know a lot about Terrace, and specifically the importance of Terrace as a hub in Northwest BC.
So Terrace is obviously located in Northwest BC. We're on the western end of Highway 16, about an hour and a half east of Prince Rupert. So we're about an hour and a bit from the coast, to the hardcore coast, Prince Rupert. We're also about 40 minutes northish of Kitimat, which is on the ocean as well. And we're about an hour and a bit outside of the Hazeltons. So Terrace sits in a very geographically central location for this part of the world. And this part of the world is very old, right? The civilizations here have been here for 30,000 years. And so this is the meeting place of the Gitxsan, of the Tsimshian, of the Niska, of the Haisla. There's so many nations that use this area together. Now, this is traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. And so we predominantly, as community members, engage with the Tsimshian. But as a regional area, it's quite a union place. And you can track that for BC as a whole. Everything that comes out of Rupert has to come through Terrace. And so our community is fortunate that it's multicultural in many ways. It might not appear that way on from a certain perspective, but from another perspective, it's quite cosmopolitan. And so bringing these two populations together in an intentional way is not, I think, all that innovative. I wish I could go, but I mean, there's evidence and studies that have been tracking this process for over 40 or 50 years. Harvard, Stanford, even Simon Fraser has an intergenerational longitudinal study that shows quite clearly that when these two populations are brought together intentionally and in a manner that they both feel safe, nearly all of the outcomes for either population are higher, right? And so what that means for us is making sure that each population is safe, and each group of people feel safe and secure and have their space, and that if people don't want to engage with each other, they don't need to. That's not forced upon them. There's no forced inclusion. However, there will invariably be groups of people from either of these groups that want to connect. And it will be our job to make sure that we find an intentional, safe way for the wisdom and the benefits, those enormous benefits of having people who have experienced the vicissitudes of life and have been able to get through it, share how they do that with people who are just starting out on the journey, and for them to feel value from each other, right? And so that's our intention, that's our goal, that's how it happened here, in that we have some real strong need for seniors housing in our community. Our co-op has a 10-year waiting list. And so it's implausible, right? It's at an impasse. And again, our community hasn't shone for, I would say, a broad spectrum, inclusive youth program outreach support system in a long time. And TDCSS had one going on, the Terrace Youth strategic initiative. We called it TIES, and we had that running for about 8-9 years before we were fortunate enough to get involved with Foundry, and that was it. So we've known for some time that youth services, senior services, there's real need in each of these areas, and bringing them together in this manner is based on evidence, based on need, and I know that the benefits, the outcomes will be better and higher for each group. And so we're committed, right? TDCSS as a community-led organization, this is why we're here. So we're in. And that's why we've made the investment to bring such a community asset to our city.
To put this all in context, there's 35 Foundry spaces across BC. You mentioned one other site that is partnered with housing. Can you talk just a little bit about, from the Foundry's perspective, how does this project play into the broader vision for the Foundry across BC? And what do you see as the future, considering this project as part of the mix?
So thanks, Sarah. So right now we have 17 centers open, and we're working with another 18 communities to identify spaces for their Foundry centers so that we can open 35 by 2027, 2028. So what we are really curious about in this second partnership is what opportunities in the future may there be with other similar buildings or other similar initiatives, and whether or not, because we're looking for spaces in large urban centers and more rural communities.
That's fantastic. Michael, I'd like to wrap by asking you to look ahead, right? So short, just outside of your window, or maybe it's outside of your door. You've got a building under construction right now. Of course, this place isn't open yet. So if you look ahead to when that building is opened, which right now is looking like some point in 2026, what do you think that's going to mean for community? Can you describe what you think it will look like for you to be walking in and for community members to be walking in the doors of that building in 2026?
Sarah, it's right in the center of town, right? I mean, this is one of the things that we knew would make it special, is that this community resource is in the center of our community. Neither group has to go far. They're not excluded. They're not shunted out to some part of where the community where no one sees them or where it's hard to get to. This is as accessible as Terrace can make it. And so this is a legacy resource, right? I mean, I bored Steve and his team. Oh my goodness, this was going to be such an incredible, long-standing generations, and that's what it's going to be. I mean, the youth who are using our services now and whose lives are becoming positively impacted by all of the positive things that happen at a Foundry, they very may well end up living on top of that house, that building, when it's their turn. And to be able to give somebody in your community that kind of continuity of care, continuity of belonging, connection to the heart of their community, that makes me feel good. I can go to bed at night. I mean, it's just such a significant win for Terrace, and the whole community was behind it. Our municipality, local politicians, and community leaders saw how valuable something like this would be, and I know that in the years to come, it will just continue to be a source and a place of safety and positive energy, for lack of a better term. Sorry, I wish I could make it sound like super fantastic, but in essence, that's what it is. It's just this enormous, incredible resource that will be able to bring positive outcomes for a whole spectrum of life cycle, right? I mean, that's a positive thing. It's not just for this part of your life or that part of your life or for people who are doing this. It's for everybody. And the more that we can incorporate that into our wellness models, holistic, integrated connection, I would love to see a Foundry BC model for senior citizens. That's what I see this building, this asset is, that's what we're hoping it's going to do, is to show the way for our province that we can do this, and that this model has applications everywhere.
Yeah, well, it's a really exciting and positive model, and I can't wait to see what happens when the new site opens. Steve, Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. Let's talk again soon. To learn more about BC Housing, including how to apply for subsidized housing in British Columbia, visit bchousing.org. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. If you enjoyed this episode, give us a rating. This will help others find Let's Talk Housing and join the conversation. You can subscribe to Let's Talk Housing on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.